Welcome, everybody. All right, today we're talking about procrastination and procrastinators. Everyone puts things off sometimes, but procrastinators chronically avoid difficult tasks and may deliberately look for distractions. And procrastination tends to reflect a person's struggles with self control. For habitual procrastinators, who represent approximately 20% of our population of the planet Earth, they say, I don't feel like it. And it comes to take precedence over their goals and responsibilities. And it sets them down a downward spiral of negative emotions that further deters their future effort. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest, most prominent ingredients of a person who is depressed is procrastination. That is a gigantic red flag that you are in a pervasive state of depression. Because procrastinators sit around and wait for an emotion. They're waiting to feel like it. So I'm waiting to feel like going on a workout. I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. and go for a workout. And then they wake up at 5 a.m. and the alarm goes off and they don't feel like it. So they don't go. They don't feel like going to work. They don't feel like going out for the day. They don't feel like doing anything special. They don't feel like spending time with you. They don't feel like walking the dog. They don't feel like making dinner. They don't feel like doing anything except for what they feel like doing, which is usually something stupid like a video game or, doom scrolling on their phones. And so the deal is procrastination is a very, very pervasive problem. It is a red flag indicator that there is something deeper going on, that you are sitting on your fat ass waiting for some emotion to motivate you. And that is not going to happen because the ingredient to solve depression is to take action and then check in with how you feel. That is called the will to live. That's called survival. As a matter of fact, procrastination is a first world problem. If you lived in a third world country where you had to hunt to survive, where you had to basically live day to day, you could not afford to procrastinate, you could not afford to be depressed, and you could not afford to be anxious. But since we live in a very simple, safe, little cocooned life in a first world country with all the luxuries of everything handed to you on a silver platter, basically what we have is a bunch of weasels who do not understand what it is to survive, what it is to have a will, what it is to make decisions, because your decisions are what make you become alive. Without decisions, you're not going to be very living. You're going to be coping, but you're not going to be living. And procrastinators have a real hard time making decisions because they can't trust themselves to follow through. Because what they basically do is they're waiting, and they're waiting on something. And they have a million reasons to wait on something, and they will justify their procrastination with all kinds of logic. Procrastination also involves a degree of self-deception. At some level, procrastinators are aware of their actions and the consequences, but changing their habits requires even greater effort than completing the task at hand. They'd rather sit around and anticipate mowing the lawn than mowing the lawn. They would rather anticipate gardening, cleaning up the backyard, cleaning up the house. They'd rather just sit around and worry about it and think about it and think about how hard it's going to be rather than get off their ass and get it done. And those people love to live in depression. They enjoy it. It's actually something they hate, but it's something that they manifest and they tend to attract. And it's sad, but there's just a lot of people like that because they can, because they have the luxury to do that. Procrastinators are often perfectionists for whom it may be psychologically more acceptable to avoid tackling a job than to face the possibility of not doing it at all. So if they can't do it well, they'd rather not do it at all. They may be so highly concerned about what others will think of them that they put their futures at risk to avoid judgment. Now, that is more of a young person problem, a prior to 50 years old problem is what I'm talking about. Because people up to about 40 to 50 years old see themselves based on how people see them. And then they go through this weird thing called a midlife crisis. And in the midlife crisis, all of a sudden they're buying the red Corvette. They're having sex with somebody 20 years younger than them. And they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff and spending all of their 401k on worthless, pathetic things, maybe even trying drugs, alcohol, whatever they have to do to define who am I, because that's their new 18 years old. Now, the sad part is that as we see ourselves externally, we don't know who we really are. We lose ourselves. So procrastinators oftentimes are worried about how they're perceived. It's an immaturity. They're very immature people because they hold themselves to a standard that other people they believe hold them to. However, it's just them and their little minds and their little rules that they've concocted for themselves that is actually stopping them. Some procrastinators contend that they perform better under pressure, but while they may be able to convince themselves of that, actually, research shows it is generally not the case. Instead, they may make a habit of last minute work to experience the rush of euphoria at seemingly having overcome the odds. But a variety of thoughts and habits drive procrastination. Fundamentally, we avoid tasks to put them off because we don't believe we'll enjoy doing them. And we want to avoid making ourselves unhappy, or that we fear we won't do them well. So people may also procrastinate when they're confused by the complexity of a task, like filling your taxes out, when they're overly distracted or fatigued. Now, if you lived in the middle of a jungle and it was going to be very dangerous, well, there's a good chance you'd try to find a cave or build a structure. And you would probably be fairly motivated to do that. But if you are just thinking of, cleaning up your garage, that's probably a whole different kind of decision. What we have to understand is that in psychology, we've identified various drivers of procrastination. Low self-confidence to anxiety. What is anxiety? Fear. A lack of structure. Simply an inability to motivate yourself to complete unpleasant things. Research has also shown that procrastination is closely linked to rumination, meaning I'd rather think about it than actually do it. I'd rather sit around and hypothesize what could happen, what disaster will happen if I do this thing. And then we become fixated on negative outcomes, catastrophizing. We love to catastrophize. And so in our mind, we'll sit around and calculate all day long what the catastrophe is going to be and prepare for every catastrophe and never get done what needs to get done. Procrastination is really a self-defeating behavior pattern, and it can be seen as serving a psychological purpose, especially for people with perfectionist tendencies. By protecting the individual from the fear of failure, the judgment of others, the self-condemnation, avoiding unpleasant work by devoting energy to other tasks like organizing or cleaning helps procrastinators avoid feeling underproductive, although they will have to pay the price for it later. Predicting how we'll feel in the future is known as effective forecasting, and people tend to be fairly bad at it. For example, procrastinators may feel bad about not exercising today, but they may lift their mood by predicting that they'll do it tomorrow. So I'll glad you play, if you ever watched Popeye, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. They avoid feeling negative emotions in the moment, but they make the cycle more likely to repeat because they fantasize in their mind that they're going to get this done in a certain time, but they procrastinate that. People who procrastinate hold different values than people who don't. There's a lot of studies where procrastinators report valuing personal enjoyment more highly than others do, valuing a strong work ethic less. So they're more likely to complete tasks they feel are important than those assigned to them. They're kind of like a rebel without a cause. Teens procrastinate. It's somewhat developmentally appropriate for teens to procrastinate, actually. The passive resistance of delay is one way adolescents may pull away from parental authority, so they're going to rebel. But increased independence and decreased supervision may also bring less structure and greater opportunity for distraction. And like adults who procrastinate, teens may come to overestimate their ability to work under pressure and their need to feel pressure to do their best work. So we have to understand that to break out of procrastination is a complex. Procrastination itself is a complex emotional regulation failure. It's not a time management issue. Driven by the brain's preference for immediate mood repair over long-term goals, it's a defense mechanism against unpleasant emotions, boredom, fear of failure, anxiety that causes people to delay. Procrastination even represents a gap between the intention and the action, often termed a quintessential breakdown of self-control. What procrastination says is you are not good at self-regulating. You are not good at adulting. You are not good at being a person of integrity. You're not good at being a person that someone can trust. You are someone who causes a lot of conflict in your life because you put off the things that are meaningful. What you have to understand is your life is always going to be decided by your decisions, your ability to decide. Procrastinators have very little ability to decide. That's why they are so freaking immature. Key psychological drivers: emotional regulation. Procrastinators avoid the negative emotions, anxiety, insecurity, frustration associated with the task, opting for immediate mood repair. So if they think they're only going to be not very good at what you're asking them to do, they're not going to do it. I don't know how to mow the lawn, so I don't know if I can do that. Just go out and freaking mow the lawn. Just go out and take a walk. Just go out, go to the gym and ask somebody how to lift a weight. Come on. I don't know why, but these people make 1,000 excuses for their procrastination. Also, to be in a relationship with these turds is the worst thing on the planet Earth because you never know when these assholes are going to get their life together and actually show up. To live with somebody like that is constant conflict. It is so sad to tie your life to one of these turkeys who cannot get things done because they put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off. It's crazy. They're immature. They're children living an adult life. Perfectionism and fear, the fear of failure, not doing a task perfectly, can lead to chronic avoidance. What in the world in this life is perfect? Just get it in the freaking ballpark and then refine it over time. Life is experiential. You learn through experience. You go do it and then you learn and learn and learn from it. That's how we learn in this life. That is the best way of learning. Then they do this thing called temporal discounting. The brain undervalues future rewards and undervalues immediate gratification, prioritizing present comfort for future benefits. There's a lot of people that will put off intimacy. They will put off spending time together because they're afraid of conflict. That's another immature trait. Emotions. They're afraid of emotions, so they'll put off everything having to do with having to have a feeling. However, if you're going to be in a relationship, the only reason you're together is because of how you felt about each other. So why in the hell would you be afraid of feelings? Duh. All right, then there is the impulsivity and low conscientiousness. It's a perfect storm. Procrastination occurs when low discipline meets high impulsivity. So ADHD people love to excuse themselves based on their stupid ADHD qualities. Well, I just couldn't pay attention. Oh, no, something distracted me. I just can't help it because I'm ADHD. These people are crazy makers. Get a grip, develop a system, set yourself up, and be accountable. If you have a freaking smartphone, set an alarm and get it done. Do it and then check in with how you feel. These people also have aversiveness. Boring or overwhelming tasks are more likely to be delayed. Procrastination involves a tug of war between the brain's emotional center, called the limbic system, and the rational planner, the prefrontal cortex, your executive functioning. The limbic system is a fast acting system, often overrides the prefrontal cortex, and it's responsible for long term planning. So, the types of procrastinators, there's many of them. One of them is the perfectionist. They delay out of fear that the work won't be perfect. There's the dreamer that avoids tasks requiring focused, practical detail. Then there's the defier, uses procrastination to resist their parents or authority or control. I'm just not going to do it because you told me to do it. Then there's the crisis makers, and these people are very hysterical and histrionic. They thrive on adrenaline of last minute deadlines. Chronic procrastination is linked to lower self esteem, anxiety, depression, and higher levels of stress. But what it really says is you got some mental health issues that need to be dealt with. Breaking tasks down, make tasks less overwhelming. If you want to overcome it, self compassion, forgiving yourself for past procrastination to reduce future avoidance. Also, addressing negative thought patterns. I must do this perfectly. What? Just do it. If you're going to have all this expectation of yourself, you're going to be depressed your whole life. Move everything that you expect of yourself and others to a preference. I prefer. I prefer this was this way, but it's not. Now we accept things as they are and we don't have betrayal and failure attached to it. A preference means that you are working with that knowledge and you're making peace that things are the way they are, and that's where you're going to begin. Procrastination may relieve pressure in the moment, but it can have really deep emotional, physical, and practical costs. People who routinely procrastinate tend to get lower, let's say, grades or lower performance in their jobs. Workers who procrastinate produce lower quality work in general. Habitual procrastinators can experience reduced well being in the form of insomnia, immune system, gastronomical disturbance. Yeah, their physical health because they procrastinate. Procrastination can also jeopardize both personal and professional relationships because you can't be trusted. You can love someone and not trust them. But when you trust someone, that's how you grow love. So if you want to think about it, somebody you haven't seen in 5 years and you trust them, there's a good chance the love is going to grow, and the next time you see each other, it's going to take off like a rocket. People who can't be trusted cannot be loved in a real way, in a lasting way. They can only be loved for their potential. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about procrastination station. There's a lot of people that are procrastination station. Oh boy, it is such a problem in this life. Once again, it's about 20% of our population. Procrastinating when it comes to your health, putting off exercise and checkups, and failing to commit to a healthy eating can lead to higher risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease. So people that procrastinate often do not take care of their bodies. They die. They die quicker because they don't take care of themselves. Oftentimes, they find themselves coping by drinking and taking drugs, and now they're going to really procrastinate and they're going to have an excuse for it. Well, I was drunk. Well, I did drugs, or I was smoking pot that day. All these stupid pot smokers procrastinate the hell. These dudes, if you see people walking into a pot shop or buying pot from their local dealer or whoever the hell they've connected with, you are looking at a mental health disorder. That is what they are. They are treating their brain because they know it's got a problem and they want to avoid it, so they smoke pot. Procrastination, avoidance, rumination are all symptoms of depression. People with depression may struggle to plan. They lose confidence in their ability to follow through. They adopt what's the point of thinking. The treatment approach is called behavior activation, which a person schedules activities that provide a sense of mastery and accomplishment. Anything hard is going to make your life easier. So if you learn a skill, people will pursue you and ask you to help them with that particular skill. That opens doors in your life. Procrastinators don't like hard at all because they are lazy. They are lazy and depressed, and they love it, and they relish it, and they live in their depression, and they will do whatever excuse they can to stay there. Once again, the remedy is action, and then check in with how you feel. Get your will back. Some of these people have no will at all, no will to live. If you dropped them in a jungle, they'd be dead in a day. Procrastinators would be dead. They are the low-hanging fruit of the human race. These are people who cannot survive on their own. They have to survive by taking everybody else for granted. It's possible to overcome procrastination, but it takes considerable effort. Changing habitual behaviors consumes a lot of psychic energy, but engaging in highly structured regimen of cognitive behavioral therapy is one approach from a therapeutic perspective that has worked for a lot of people. In the short term, some cognitive tricks can help people complete discrete tasks. There's a thing called behavior modification. It is a overt and covert reward system. So for instance, if you have a 12-year-old and you put them on a behavior contract, okay, you're going to lose your phone if you talk back, don't do your chores, and don't do your homework. If you apologize the first time you violate it, you will lose it only for half the time, like a half a day. If you don't apologize and you do it, you lose it for a full day. If you do it again, it's going to be 3 days. If you do it again, it's going to be a week. If you don't, if you do all your chores and do your homework and you don't talk back like a jerk, guess what? You're going to get a reward at the end of those 5 days. And that reward does not have to be financial. It could be something they really, really want, which is more time doing something stupid. But the bottom line is that you as a parent can help manage your kids' procrastination by putting them on a behavior contract, but you probably need to do it for yourself too. Studies based on the procrastination on the work scale, which identifies 12 common forms of workplace procrastination, and this is studied worldwide. It highlights some potential solutions like adopting timelines that build in time for delay, but not too much, making personal challenge out of mundane tasks, breaking large jobs into achievable chunks so you can celebrate completing, and limiting your access to online news and social media because that will distract the heck out of you. The deal is that you have to understand that the journey is the outcome, not the outcome is the journey. People who procrastinate perceive that the journey, the outcome is the journey. And when they think like that, what they do is they measure their life based on completed tasks. But you are never, ever going to be measured on completed tasks. What you're going to be measured on is your constant staying in the process, to get to the destination. And yes, the destinations have rewards, but that is not your entire self-esteem. Your self-esteem is built on staying in the journey. When people procrastinate, their present self benefits of avoiding unpleasant work, their future self pays the price in stress and punishment. Developing empathy. If you sit around and procrastinate something you know you have to do at work, you know that everybody is looking at you. You know your boss is looking at you. And when it comes down to it, people know that you are a procrastinator. They know it. You probably brag about it. And if you are one of these people that procrastinates, you are a target. You are a target for an employer to say, I do not need that in my life. I do not need to be paying for that from that human being. You're not a very valuable person when you procrastinate because people cannot count on you. You have to understand that you have got to begin thinking about can I stop putting off important decisions? Many procrastinators struggle to make important decisions in part because not making a choice absolves them of accountability for the outcome. What in the world is that? A person has no character if they don't make decisions. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go? What a bunch of crap. Can you just say, okay, I'd like American, Chinese, I don't know, Italian? Can't you throw some ideas out there? But the bottom line is you don't know how to love somebody who's indecisive. Procrastinators are, nobody knows how to love them because they can't make any choices. They put things off. You can only teach people how to love you by making decisions, and you can always change your mind. They procrastinators have a huge problem making decisions. Sometimes people simply get so exhausted from making decisions that it seems impossible to make relatively unimportant ones. Research has even suggested that sticking to a personal set of decision-making rules or outsourcing decisions to a partner, a friend, a coworker may overcome decision fatigue. Yes, you might want to figure out how to delegate and empower people around you if you have fatigue making decisions. Almost everybody procrastinates at one point or another. For many, the issue doesn't interfere with their quality of life, but if you find yourself continually procrastinating and then regretting it, you could be caught in a negative cycle of depression and hopelessness. And it's easy to be hard on yourself when you delay tasks, either at home or in the workplace. But do you deserve self criticism? Or is your procrastination pointing to something more serious? Yeah, you're depressed. That's what it's saying. You have depression and you need to deal with it. That's what it's saying. It's important to know that procrastination is not your fault, but there are reasons we engage in the behavior and there are ways we can address it because it's a coping skill. People that you would consider experts define procrastination as a self-defeating behavior pattern marked by short-term benefits and long-term costs. And the problem is the long-term costs, these short-term decisions have a long-term problem. You know it's going to come to harvest. And when it comes to harvest, you're not going to have anything on the other side. And the anticipation of that all the way through getting your short-term benefits is going to pay a huge cost in your self-esteem. Many of us know it's putting off things that we need to get done, no matter what the level of difficulty behind it. We all procrastinate. However, when we develop the habit of putting off necessary actions, even when we face negative consequences, especially when we are going to face consequences, procrastination affects our well-being because we sit around knowing that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And that alone is a horrible burden to place on your thinking. 20 to 25% of adults worldwide are chronic procrastinators. The issue is linked to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, ADHD, and poor study habits. When somebody is late, when they're chronically late, That is a procrastinator. That is a depressed human being. That is somebody who has anxiety. That is a mental disorder showing up, is what it is. Procrastination is connected to negative functioning and risks to mental health. People who procrastinate tend to have high levels of anxiety as well as poor impulse control. It's even linked to physical illness. People who procrastinate experience more stress, tend to delay treatments, tend to not go to the doctor when they need to go, tend to not take care of themselves, tend to not go to the gym even though they're paying $500 a month to go there and never do. Even though procrastination results in more stress in the long term, people may delay action with the idea that they will feel better in the short term. These people, all they care about is the short term because they want pleasure, 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 pleasure. These are conflict avoidant turkeys. These people are children living an adult life. These people cannot make choices. These people are afraid. They live in fear. They have no idea what faith is, even though they all probably, many of them probably go to church and pray to God that they'll help them. But the bottom line is that since they live in fear, they have no relationship with faith. What is faith? I'm going to get it done. I can handle it. I know I've made it this far. I may not do it perfectly, but I'm going to get it done. That is how people if you can operate in faith, you're going to get a lot done in this life, and you're going to feel good. It makes sense that if you perceive an activity as boring or unpleasant, you're likely to put it off until later. But how does it feel to knock it out and get it done and then know you've got that part of your day done? That is a good thing. That's called self-discipline. A lack of belief in your abilities. Another reason you may procrastinate is you lack the faith in your abilities. Believing that you can't carry out tasks is essential to functioning. If your sense of self-efficacy is low, your buoyancy, your ability to survive, you're less likely to begin a task or to see it through. Fear and anxiety runs the show. You may procrastinate out of fear. For example, you might delay essential medical tests because you're afraid of a diagnosis of cancer or some ungodly thing. The more anxiety we experience about it, the more likely we are to put it off. But you may actually get cancer from all the worry and all of the killing of your white blood cell count because you're sitting around stressed out about what your diagnosis might be. You think that's going to help you sitting around worrying about it? You'd rather know than not know. That's going to help you get better. Now you're on the other side of it from the moment you know. Not only does your stress level increase when you do this, but there's a risk of physical health with an undetected, untreated illness. Is that really what you want? And is that the example you want to set for your kids? Is that the example you want to set for your employees? Is that the example you want to set for the people who love you? No. Come on. Grow up. Step into your big boy or your big girl pants and step into life and stop procrastinating. Social anxiety also plays a role. Fear of being judged, embarrassed, could cause you to put off scheduling meetings or completing projects. Well, all you have to do is be honest. I'm not completely ready for this meeting, but I'm going to do the best I can. You know what? I've never done this before, but I'm going to do it. I did a little bit of research. I'm trying, so I'm just going to give you what I got. Be there, be present with what you have. Perfectionism can play a huge role. People who delay tasks believe they won't perform well or that they'll fail altogether. They have a great fear of failure. But what is failure? Failure is the scientific process. That is how we evolve. That is how we make better things in this life, is through failure. Failure is called experiential learning. You learn from the experience of failure so that you can make things better. They also try to put off a task until they suddenly feel more inspired or have a better idea, even though inspiration is more likely to strike as a person starts a task. That's when you're really thinking about it. Commit to start, and then get your ideas as you're moving through. Then there's this thing called distraction. Oh, I'm ADHD. Okay, so in our environment, it can prevent us from focusing on the task at hand. Many of us can relate to the lure of social media over a dreaded activity like paying bills. Researchers believe procrastination has increased in these recent years after COVID. Technology has been a factor. However, procrastination has been reported as a human behavior throughout the history of mankind. Children and teens, they also procrastinate for many reasons, just like adults. They fear making mistakes because they have these ogres as their parents. What grade did you get today? You could do better. You got an A minus. I can't believe you did that. People parent through negativity so much. What a bunch of jerks. Why did you breed in the first place? You should be cheering your kids on. You should be encouraging them. You should be using kind words. You should be telling them what their potential is. You should be telling them you believe in them rather than sitting around critiquing them for not getting the grade that you expect. A child who delays turning in a homework assignment may be unclear about the directions. If you notice they're procrastinating, be patient and clear about asking them questions. Are you afraid that you don't know enough? What can we do to make you get more confident? How can I help you here to learn? On the other hand, children who chronically procrastinate may do so because they've gotten away with the behavior in the past. And it's important for parents and other caregivers to follow through with the requests to help children develop healthy habits. If you have to ask your kid to do something 8,000 times and they never get it done and you end up doing it for them, you are the problem. You have no self discipline. You have no follow through. It's called consequences. You give your kids consequences when they do not get done what needs to get done. It's not an emotional event, it is a transaction. Okay, you're going to lose this because you can't get this done. So I'm sorry you lost it. Okay? It's a transaction. It's not an emotional event. If you're going to make it into an emotional event, if you're going to parent when you're angry, you are stupid. You need to parent transactionally so that your kid will respect you. It's important to know that procrastination is not a sign of laziness. Although procrastination is not considered a mental health condition in and of itself, it is very connected to mental health diagnoses across the board. Several studies have linked procrastination to depression, anxiety, low self esteem, ADHD, as we've talked about, OCD, and other conditions. It can be hard to know what comes first. Symptoms of mental health disorders like racing thoughts and fatigue can make it hard to take on tasks. On the other hand, putting things off can create stress that leads to mental health concerns. Procrastination exacerbates mental health disorders. When people choose short term rewards over long term benefits, they may struggle with self regulation, which means they're children living an adult life. Self regulation involves behaviors like our ability to plan ahead or pause before we react and actually be a responsive person rather than a reactive person. It plays a role in substance use disorders and other conditions that involve impulse control. There's so many studies over procrastination. When we stay on task, even while the task inspires dread, we're managing challenging emotions. Emotions are meant to motivate. You can pick what emotion to use, even if it's anger and it motivates you. Use it if it helps you get something done you need to get done. All right, we're going to take another break and we're going to come right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about procrastination. Avoiding tasks out of fear of an unpleasant outcome is a sign also of anxiety. For example, when people fear a result, they may delay learning the results of a test, avoid taking the test altogether. People with anxiety may also struggle with perfectionism. And when that's the case, they feel stuck in a project. If they feel they aren't doing well or as well as possible, they may delay or they may not complete it whatsoever. People with anxiety have the tendency to feel overwhelmed, which can make it hard to begin the task at all. And when we perceive an overload of information, it can be hard to know where to begin. People with depression tend to dwell on negative thoughts and experience of self-doubt. They're more likely to struggle with low self-esteem and believe they cannot carry out the task at hand. Lower energy levels and difficulty motivating yourself are two common symptoms of depression. If someone can't muster the energy to complete a task, they may find it easier to put off until they feel better. With depression, it can be difficult to gauge or when someone feels motivated enough to complete what they need to do. They may also ruminate on the past procrastination and lack self-compassion, which can further the cycle of putting things off. Indecisiveness is another symptom of depression. It also contributes to procrastination. Procrastination is also a symptom of inattentive type of ADHD. That's versus the hypertype. People with the inattentive presentation of ADHD, as well as those with a combined presentation of inattentive and hyperactive, can have difficulty regulating their attention, staying organized, and can be easily distracted. They can also struggle with aspects of executing functioning, including working memory, flexible thinking, self-control. All of these factors can interfere with starting and completing tasks. Why? Because our brain is searching for stimulation. The brain in an ADHD person is all the sensory perceptions are on high alert all the time. So if you hear a noise down the hall, they're going to hear that noise. If they see something, they're going to go for that. If somebody behind them is talking, they're going to be listening to that. If they smell something, they're going to focus on that. So what we have to understand is with ADHD, they're very distractible. So how do you calm that brain down? A stimulant calms their brain down because if you stimulate their brain, and that's a medication, then basically what happens is their brain calms down enough to pay attention and normalize. Hyperfixation is another symptom of ADHD that contributes to procrastination. When people become extremely focused on the tasks they enjoy. So they get locked up in a video game and they're having a great time and they're hunting and they're killing people and they're shooting people and they're doing stealing cars and doing all the things that video games allow them to do and hunting in the caves and getting all kinds of treasures or whatever the stupid thing is that they tend to find themselves entertaining themselves with. Bottom line is they're so caught up in that world that if you ask them to brush their teeth, it's going to be like a Broadway performance or an aria in an opera to get them to do it. Oh, I'm doing this. This is so hard to me. Oh, you don't understand. I need to do this thing. You know, it's crazy. They get locked in on these things that they like doing, like hunting, because they're hunters, and they cannot stand doing things that they don't think is valuable because they think that what they think is valuable is the only thing that's valuable. That's why these people are very difficult to be in relationships with. Procrastination causes anxiety. If you think the task in the question is not worth your time, you may find yourself struggling to accept a project or complain that it's boring, has no meaning, and won't make any difference. So this is why a lot of kids with ADHD fall behind in classes because they don't see any purpose in what they're learning. And since they don't see a purpose in what they're learning, they're not going to focus on that. They're going to focus on thinking about the movie they want to watch when they get home or the video game they're about to play. If the undertaking doesn't generate a clear reward like income, it can be harder to finish. And in those situations, you may not even recognize that you're struggling. Your mind may not register that you're fearful or anxious. One of the most common symptoms of procrastination is fear of a negative, unknown outcome. If you're fueled by anxiety, you're going to sit around hypothesizing all of the disasters that you could possibly hypothesize, and you're going to tear your self-esteem down, 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 down. because you're going to be inadequate, incapable, or a failure. You may put off tasks because you're afraid of not achieving perfect results. You also may fear being criticized, God forbid, or avoidance of these feelings may contribute to pushing back deadlines, stockpiling tasks, and getting comfortable not taking action. If you are married to one of these turds, it is miserable to be with these people because they take no accountability whatsoever for their procrastination. They, they still continue to lock into their habit of doing things when they feel like it. They are obstinate about doing that. It's very, very, very important for us to understand that getting through procrastination can be done. It can be the ability to heal. Procrastination is not a matter simply of having poor time management skills, but rather can be traced to underlying more complex psychological problems. The dynamics are made worse by schools where students are constantly being evaluated, and especially in colleges where the pressure for grades is high and a lot can be riding on students' performance. You know, there are steps you can take to get out of the procrastination cycle. First of all, is the awareness. To overcome procrastination, you need to have an understanding of the reasons why you procrastinate and the function of procrastination serves in your life. You can't come up with the effective solution if you don't really understand the root of the problem. As with most problems, awareness and self knowledge are the keys to figuring out how to stop procrastinating. For a lot of people, acquiring insight about how procrastination protects them from feeling like they're not able enough and keeping in mind that they are tempted to fall into familiar, unproductive procrastinating habits goes a long way to solving the problem. For instance, you know, many people overcome procrastination by playing mind games, basically giving themselves a reward system for getting things done that they don't want to do. Time management techniques is another part of the puzzle. To overcome that, procrastination, time management, things like tools are indispensable. They are not enough by themselves, but not all methods of managing time are equally helpful in dealing with procrastination. There's some time management techniques that are well suited to overcoming procrastinations. Others make it worse. Those who reduce anxiety and fear, emphasize satisfaction with rewards, are completing tasks work best. So what's important is you set a clock, you set a time, you set a structure, and you don't negotiate it anymore. You just do it. If you're going to get up at 5 a.m. to get your exercise done, get your ass out of bed at 5 a.m. and get it done and make it a habit every single day of your life. Motivation is also a thing that you have to find within yourself. To overcome procrastination, it's critical that you stay motivated. You give yourself productive reasons, reasons for learning, for achieving, to lead to positive, productive, satisfying feelings and actions. These reasons are in contrast to engaging in a task out of fear of failing. You know, if you're going to learn something, learn it for the people that you're going to help. Don't learn it for your income. Don't learn it for yourself. Learn it to pass it on as a gift to other people. If you're going to become a plumber, learn to be a plumber for the people you're going to serve, not for yourself. If you're going to be an actor, learn how to act for others, not for yourself. If you're going to learn a talent, do it because you have in mind the people that you want to help. Also, staying motivated. You have to be actively engaged. Overcoming procrastination is stay actively engaged in your activities. That means you invest in the process, not the outcome. You get to the outcome, but the process of learning is more important than the outcome. It's a means to an end. You have to be aware. You have to reflect on reasons why you procrastinate, your habits, your thoughts that lead to procrastinating. You have to assess what feelings lead to procrastinating. How does it make you feel? Are these positive, productive feelings? Do you want to change them? For every goal, people rate several characteristics on a sliding scale from 0 to 100. These include how much effort they intended to apply, how likely they were to deliberately avoid making the goal. They also rate how important the goal is to them personally, their perceived likelihood of actual success, how much control they had felt, the overall difficulty of the objective. Also, people look at this the specific mental exercise. They imagine a future scenario in which they successfully complete each goal. They also look at the mental simulations to motivate themselves based on their sensory details like sights and sounds. They focus on what the benefit of what they are doing is going to create on the backside. They also expect emotional responses. And oftentimes people get demotivated if they don't get the emotional responses that they want. That's why their motivations have to be internal rather than external. If you're going to give people the power of whether or not you're going to complete something based on waiting on a response from them, you are immature and you need to grow up and pull it from your inside and do the right thing and then check in with how you feel about doing it, but don't base how you feel based on how people respond. You should be happy that you're doing the right thing. You also have to measure your tendency to delay things. People who delay things and are aware of how they delay things have a better shot than people who just go, I'm a procrastinator. That's just what I do. I can't help it. I'm always late. Blah, 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 blah. These people are in a high state of denial. Denial is a huge part of their character. Procrastinators are also liars. They lie a lot. They're white liars because they have to make excuses for their procrastination. They lie their butts off. So if you see somebody that procrastinates, there's a real good chance they're a liar too. High procrastinators have lower intended effort, lower perceived likelihood of success, and a lower self esteem. They also usually have poor health. Despite the negative outlooks, highly procrastinating people rate their goals as just as important as other people. They just don't get them done. So they just rip down their self esteem minute by minute, day by day, by not getting the things done they need to get done. Stop debating, stop hypothesizing, get it done, figure it out, and then if it doesn't work out, figure out how to make it better and just keep going. Or if you do it and you don't do it to your satisfaction, communicate that you're not satisfied with it, but this is where it is. It's called a preference. Keep it there. You know, being a procrastinator does not necessarily mean having lower self-awareness of positive future states of having completed a goal. Most prominent difference in the emotional realm, is specifically regarding anticipatory anxiety. People who have high procrastination are more anxious when contemplating goal failure. This aligns with the idea that procrastination is largely driven by a desire to avoid the negative feelings associated with the task. So, for instance, if I'm going to sit around and worry about failing a test, not a great motivator. If I could sit around and develop a process and a strategy of passing the test, I'm probably going to do a better job on the test because I'm following a strategy to become aware of how to do better on the test. That is going to be a lot more motivating than sitting around worrying about failing a stupid test. Anxiety is especially pronounced for short-term goals. The people that have studied procrastination note that this might be counterintuitive at the first glance, but long-term goals are often perceived as more important and carry a heavier penalty for failure. However, for a high procrastinator, imminent deadlines tend to evoke much stronger, more immediate emotional response. Short-term goals loom larger emotionally, prompting a greater anxiety right now. Many people who are procrastinators do not like change. They don't like change fast. They get really scared that if you drop something on them, they are like horrible buttholes because they can't stand it, because they don't want to fail. I'm going to be 5 minutes late because you're going to make me late. Oh, this is terrible. I can't believe you did. These people, procrastinators, they have excuses for every single thing on the planet Earth. They are crazy makers, crazy makers. No integrity whatsoever. The findings, shine a light when they do studies on the relevance of emotional anticipation. It's very important to understand that emotional anticipation of negative results is a high part of procrastination. But if you start to have faith that you're going to be able to deliver a result, you don't know what the result's going to be, but it's going to be the best that you can give, that is a much better motivator. Anxiety around goal failure is a hallmark feature of procrastination. That suggests that strategies for managing anxiety might be just as important as attempts to change people's perception of distance rewards to help them manage impulses. The key to procrastination is to learn to stay in the process. Stay in the process and have a strategy. Having a strategy is much more important than getting to a goal. Commitment is a huge part of learning to deal with procrastination. You want to break down tasks, you want to prioritize, and you want to commit. People are terrible at committing nowadays, especially to marriage. Commitment, you're never going to get everything out of something until you fully commit to it. All right, that's our show. I want to thank everybody for listening. I love hearing from you. You can do that on our webpage, voiceamericamedia.com or libsyn.com, Libsyn, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Remember, procrastination is like charging on a credit card. Also, procrastination is being busy doing nothing. Also, procrastination is the art of keeping up with yesterday. Thank you for listening.